Okay, we're live. Hey, everyone. We're going to take a look at Draw Steel. We got packet 4 for the Patreons came out, and I'll talk about the ShadowDark adventure I just ran. And a couple of free ShadowDark adventures came out from Kelsey, so we'll look at those. Have you guys played Draw Steel yet? I'd be interested. Let us know in the chat if you guys have done or had a game of Draw Steel that you've got to play and what your thoughts of Draw Steel are. We'll let people kind of filter in here, David. We were just talking about Mike Merles has got a Patreon he's doing. That's interesting to watch.
It's been fascinating because he was the lead designer of D&D Next, the edition that became 5th edition. And he's kind of going through a process of rethinking some of the bits of 3rd edition and reconsidering what he might change in his own variant of the game. And it's kind of interesting because so far the 3rd edition, 5th edition offshoots we've seen, like Level Up and Tales of the Valiant and, dare I say, 2024, they're just sort of coloring in on the edges and making tweaks. But he's rethinking a lot of the core bits and doing so without changing it into a kind of a different game.
Yeah. It's fun to watch. It's fun to watch. It's like everyone's creating their own game system right now. Even I'm doing it. It's fun. It's fun to just hack out a system and kind of put down to paper the things you like. Like my preference is somewhere between ShadowDark and 5e, maybe leaning more towards ShadowDark than 5e. I was disappointed by 2024. It just felt like, here's a couple more pieces of candy. Please buy our books. When I wanted them to really take a relook at the game and, make sure they fix the things that were wrong with it. Mike's going even further though. He's changing like the core architecture, so that'd be interesting to see what he comes up with. I remember he wasn't a big fan of bonus actions, and I haven't noticed what he did on that yet. So we'll see what he does with the action economy.
Yeah,
that
would be fascinating because from my perspective as an outsider to game design, I don't know how you do it without bonus actions.
Yeah, I mean, you either have to have bonus actions or say some things are free to do, right? Little nuanced things like opening doors and picking things up off the ground and changing your weapons and things like that. So let's look at the action economy in Draw Steel. We're looking at the Draw Steel character sheet here. No action economy on the character sheet, but we can see 5 ability scores. So they got rid of basically Constitution because that's an ability score that doesn't go to anything. They call them characteristics. That doesn't go to anything, but everyone wants a high value. And so they just said, well, let's just assume everyone has a high value.
Something along those lines.
Right? And not worry about it. So they have that. Let's look at the hero book. And in chat, if you guys have any questions overall about Draw Steel, we'll look at the hero book here. So let me know, and I can definitely kind of bounce around and look at the different parts of the game. So what is the game? They define it. They have a nod here to ShadowDark, which is nice, but they define it as heroic fantasy. Saying that's a little too broad. They get to tactical. It's a tactical game where position matters, so the game's played on a grid. That's an interesting, deviation from a lot of games lately that want to do things abstract, like ShadowDark and games like that. They're like hardcore. We're playing on a grid. You're counting squares. Which I like a game like that. It might not be for everyone.
It's opinionated, so that's a good thing. You and I both love playing on a grid or some sort of tactical situation like that. But there are plenty of folks out there who just don't want to count squares under any circumstances, and that's cool too.
Definitely about heroism. It doesn't assume you're primarily motivated by greed. They worry only about the things that your character is doing. So it's really interesting. They really abstract the gear you carry. You're just assumed to have the gear that goes with your skills. And they abstract, you're not tracking every torch, you're not tracking every piece of rations. They're really focused more on, dare I say it, the 4E encounter combat, type of part of the game. Now they have a lot of other stuff that they've brought into it as well, but they're really focused on the tabletop part. Cinematic. So we've played some games and some Draw Steel games. David's been in a couple. We had Treant Monk in a couple. He played a couple times, and I think Teos played with us, and they've been really, I think, a lot of fun. They felt very cinematic to me. I mean, people were getting pushed all over the place, knocked through windows, knocked off walls, people jumping on top of other people, stuff like that. So you can check out the YouTube videos after the stream, the Fall of Black Bottom highlights, and then the last one, the Raiders of the Hidden Temple. That's the ShadowDark game that I just ran. But they were a lot of fun. What do you think about, how did it feel on the table, David?
Oh, absolutely. It's a lot of big things happening. Nobody's sitting there whittling away at a foe with a blade striking over and over again. Lots of grand sweeping things happening all across the battlefield. And that gives it an exciting feel.
They're fantasy, dragons and stuff, but they have a lot of little like other nuanced things in there. We'll see that when they look at the monster manual, which is really informed by their setting. They have the automatic damage. They've changed it a bit, so it's kind of like a tiered roll, and you get tiered effects to what you're doing. But you're always advancing in your defeat of the enemies, and your enemies are always advancing in their defeat of you. And so you need to be advancing faster than they are, right? You don't need to rest all the time. In fact, it really prioritizes, it does this better than like the opposite of what 4th edition did. You get better and better powers as the day goes on, or as a fight goes on, which is really cool how that happens. So you're incentivized to keep going, be the great hero that gets to the end of the adventure, and as your fight goes on, instead of using your daily powers at the start, like in 4E, you're using them at the end for the big finish of the encounters.
Which is wonderful, because things continue to escalate. There's no 5-minute adventuring day, and the fights get bigger and the effects get bigger as you go on.
Yeah. Having run it several times, there's a lot going on as a DM, and it's really in the game stuff going on. So you are really taxed as a DM, I would say. At least I felt that way when I ran. Maybe that'll get better for me as I run more games of it. And I think 4E was a little bit that way, although they fixed a lot of the problems with 4E with how they do effects and things. So that's better. Hopefully that'll get better, and it won't be too taxing. If you like a easy game to run, this might not be the game for you. I don't dare say.
Yeah, there's a lot of memory load on remembering all the things that the creatures can do. And if you have a cadre of creatures like they used to recommend in 4th edition, where you kind of select a grab bag of different creature types, wow, you're going to have to remember a lot of stuff. And I do remember that. I do know that gets easier when you practice.
Yeah. When you have experience with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the combat round, action economy is a 3-action economy, kind of like a 3-action economy, except the actions are actually siloed. You have action, you have movement, and you have maneuvers. And the siloing works pretty well. You can downgrade an action to a movement or a maneuver. You cannot trade movements or maneuvers across with each other. So that can lead to a weird case where you don't have a third thing to do in a round. And that will get better with experience, because there's a lot of things you can do that maybe you're not thinking of doing, but you'll know what, you can always knock someone back, you can always help an ally, things like that you might not think to do that you can do in the system. And I think James talked about how they siloed them to make it faster for the player to decide what to do. Because if it was just 3 generic actions to do, like Pathfinder uses, you'd have a hard time picking those 3. You can't get analysis paralysis.
Absolutely.
So we have the combat round here. I will look down. In the combat round, we have actions. So charging, defending, free strikes, healing. And then you have maneuvers.
Remind me, Tom, how does the turn order work?
Oh, we'll get to the turn order here. Yeah, let's start with that. Combat round. So combat starts whenever whenever it naturally would start. You determine surprise. You determine who goes first, and you do that by just rolling the d10. And as long as if everyone on the side is surprised, that side loses initiative. But as long as someone on each side is not surprised, and you roll a d10, it's randomly determine who goes first. And then the creatures are going to take their turns. And this is beneficial for the GM, they call director in this game, in that the big bad monster can always go first. So they'll always get a chance to go before they're dogpiled and destroyed, like often happens in a 5e game. And then they alternate back and forth. So whoever goes first, maybe a player goes, and then the big bad monster goes, and then another player, then another monster, or the reverse of that. Now, all of this means that your position in the turn order can vary, and they encourage you to talk about it, determine who acts next. When it comes to the hero side, the choice of who should act next is intended to give players the opportunity to comment, strategize, and plan. That can lead to some slow play, or it can be something a group likes to do. It's not my preference, but it might be a lot of groups' preference. But they give, for my preference, an alternative way to do it, which is basically the standard way to do the turn order, where you roll an agility test, which is like dexterity, and you place the order. Now, even though I like the speed of that, because everyone knows when their turn is, so they're ready to go when their turn comes up, it gets rid of the chance to have that big bad guy go on the director's side at the start. Well, they have an alternative. At the director's discretion, a hero can swap their turn in the initiative order with another willing hero at the start of a new round of combat. I'd say add that in for the director too. So the director can have 2 monsters swap their turn. So you can get the big bad guy in the start always and still have set initiative order. That's the way I'd probably run it. That'd be my preference for running it. What's your preference for running an initiative, David?
Well, I definitely like people knowing where their initiative comes up and having a regimented order, because I think it slows things down too much for most groups picking their spot.
Yeah, it is. Definitely. Okay, so let's see, that was the turn order. That's how you select the turn order. Then take your turn. We talked about you have a move, maneuver, and an action. In any order, you can break your movement up, and you can turn your action into a move or a maneuver. So you could end with 2 moves, 1 maneuver, 2 maneuvers, 1 move. And things are kind of in there nuanced where you'd expect them to be from other game systems. You also have free actions and free triggered actions. Triggered actions and free triggered actions. You have free maneuvers, boring stuff like opening an unlocked door, picking up an item from the ground, etc. And then you have no actions, like not even on your turn, shouting out for help or something like that. So that's the types. Then you got movement, and movements in squares. So we're playing on a grid. Most heroes have a move of 5 squares, 25 feet is what we'd expect. There's no Pythagorean theorem, so diagonals cost 1 all the time. I don't mind that at all. I think it speeds up play. Can't cut corners. You can shift to carefully move by someone. And usually you can only shift 1 square with your movement, but there's other things in the game that can allow you to shift more. You got movement types. And then here's where the fun of the game happens. And this will, if you get a chance to play this, it'll be constant. You'll be surprised how often things are just being slammed into each other in this game. So you got slamming into creatures, slamming into objects, hurling through objects, and that's just like a constant thing. And it's set up so easy. It was almost painless to run. When I was running it, it was just right away. It was easy to run. Okay, so then what's the next step? Okay, so we looked at movement, your move actions, disengaging. That lets you shift 1. So that lets you step away, and then you can use your action to move again. I don't know if you can move with a maneuver. Let's see, with maneuvers, you can aid attack, catch breath. This is how you get back hit points. And in the last packet, this was an action. So they moved the catch breath from being an action to being a maneuver, and you can use it to get back your healing, surge, and hit points, or your recovery, they call it, in stamina instead of hit points, which all the same things. Escape a grab, grabbing someone. So if you're, what do I do with my maneuver? You can always grab someone. You can always knock someone back. And there's going to be pushing all over the place because no matter what you roll, you push them 1. And that's a maneuver that maybe you weren't going to do anything else with it anyway. And then there's things that can modify these up and down. Some creatures are more stable, like dwarves have a built-in stability where they reduce these things by 1 each, and you get armor kits that make it better and powers that make it better.
Yeah, Tom, hearing you talk about moving characters around so much makes me want to change my answer about changing the initiative order, because I do recall playing the game, there was a lot of maneuvering around initiative so one character could set up a move and tee up on somebody for somebody else and all that kind of stuff. And that was pretty fun, even though, you know, there's a potential extra drag on the speed.
Yeah, you're right. That was pretty cool. All right. So any questions in the chat, let us know. If you have anything you want to look at specifically in Draw Steel. Next thing I want to look at was, we looked at combat. Let's look at making a hero, or let's look at what types of heroes there are. So under making a hero, you have step-by-step hero making, ancestry. So ancestries, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 ancestries. You have your trusty human. You got devil, which would be like tiefling in D&D. Dragon knight, like dragonborn. Dwarf, like dwarf. A couple types of elves. Woden high. Hakan, I don't know what that is without looking it up again. Memonek, which I think is like a Warforged type of thing. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I reverse those. Polder is like a halfling. Orc you can play. Time Raider you can play. So, you know, I guess it's it would have been nice if it was different, that they changed the name of everything. It's like the same thing, but it's got a different name. And okay, I mean, they have stamina, they have recoveries, they have your characteristics. They're all named different, but they're all stuff we're used to. So once you get the connection, if you've played a lot of tabletop RPGs, you'll know what they are. If you're brand new, you'll learn from this game. You'll have to relearn when you pick up D&D or some other game like it.
I'm not connecting that Time Raider. I need pictures. But
I know.
I suppose we'll get those in the book.
In the book.
Yeah.
Time Raider, God, yeah. Like they start out with a kind of what they are, but not what they look like.
Well, they introduce them with sort of little bits of fiction that I haven't read yet, but
yeah,
I wanted to see just a paragraph that says, this is a, like. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, you talked about potencies. So that's a new thing. So this is kind of the format for any kind of power that they have. These are powers that come from their ancestry, so they're not quite as potent as a lot of powers they have. But you'll do a power roll, which is 2d10, plus usually your characteristic that goes with it. And those all start out for a brand new character at +2. I don't know what they'd get to at 10th level, so I don't know how high you'd expect those to go. But you roll your 2d10, and if you get a 12 or higher, you get the second tier result. At 17 or higher, the third tier result. And they get better and better. And then at some tiers, you might do something that can be resisted. And the potency of how much you do depends on your highest characteristic, I believe. So when they say here, you're going to do 7 damage plus your reason characteristic, which is usually 2, so 9 damage. You're going to push the creature 2 squares, and if their might is less than your strong, I forget what the word was again. You knock them prone.
Potency, yeah.
Potency, yeah. So your strong potency, there's 3 levels of potency, and strong, we can look at them here in a second, but it's the highest characteristic you have. So this is going to be 2. So if you're trying to hit someone with a might of less than 2, they'll be knocked prone with this. And there are ways you can increase that potency value. We'll talk about that in a second. Where would it be? Character options. I think it's under classes, actually. Okay, let's look at the classes, and then we'll look at the potencies and how you can adjust your things. So the classes, again, are all different names. similar to what you might expect: a Censor, similar to a Paladin; Conduit, similar to a Cleric. I mean, they're similar, but they're definitely different. You know, lots of differences. Elementalist, maybe like a Sorcerer or a Wizard. Fury like a Barbarian. Null like a Monk, I think. Shadow like a Rogue, Tactician. This is more like a Warlord than a Fighter, but a Fighter. Talent would be a Scion, and Troubadour, Bard. So there's your 9 classes that come in the game. Good mix there. And then if you're looking at what a class gets, let's look at a class. So if I look at the Fury, which is like the Barbarian, they're going to start with a Might of 2 and an Agility of 2, and then they'll assign their other 3 scores. Their strong potency is going to be their Might. So that'll define anything that's in their powers that says strong. They'll use 2 because their Might will be 2. And then 1 for average and 0 for weak. They start with hit points or stamina of 21, gain 12 per level after that. They have 10 recoveries, which is like healing surges. And then at first level, this is the kind of stuff they'd have. They pick an aspect of their class. So like right away, it's like a subclass kind of. So you could pick Berserker for a quick build. They have quick build options here too, Berserker. And then you're going to have your Rage. Rage was fun in combat. You never played, I think, a Barbarian, but their Rage goes up fast. And they're always powering big things with their Rage. So that's a lot of fun. Growing Rage, aspect features, aspect triggered. Okay, so then I can tell they've been doing a lot of cleanup in here. If I look at what we played with the first time, Lines of Force, this was called, what was this called? It was called Relentless Toss before. And they kind of cleaned up just how it works a little bit. You can spend your Rage to empower it a little bit more. And then your signature ability, you pick one. One signature ability, they have a list of 1, 2, 3, 4 to pick from. And they give you a quick build. So quick build is to the death. So you come here to the death. Your Reckless Assault leaves you tactically vulnerable. Keywords are melee, strike, and weapon. Types and action. Distance is a melee 1 creature or object. So you do a 2d10 plus 2 roll. And if you get an average result, you're doing 8 damage. And it has an effect. You gain 2 surges. So surges is a mechanic you can track, and you can spend surges to increase damage you do with an attack. When a battle ends, you lose all your surges. So you want to use them up during the battle. Each surge you spend gives you plus your most powerful characteristic to the damage. And if you spend 2 surges, you increase the potency of a power you have. So if you're using Impaled, which you roll an average roll, you're going to do 7 damage. And if their might is less than 1, you're going to grab them. And if you were to spend 2 surges, it'd be might less than 2 would be grabbed. So that's kind of how surges work in with potencies and with damage.
Yeah, each class has their own resource that they use during fights that tends to build during the course of the fight. I am hugely fond of the core mechanic in this game. It's something unique. It has a little bit of a triangle result with you rolling 2d10s. Everybody loves rolling 2d10s. And those formulas that you were showing a moment ago on the page, they seem a little bewildering at first glance, but they pack a lot of information into a pretty simple bit of work there. So there's a lot going for it on this game's core mechanic. And I guess I sound like a total game design nerd gushing about the core mechanic of a game, but virtuoso job here.
The gameplay was really good too. Just not knowing anything about it, just hopping in and playing was pretty intense, pretty fun. Here's my Roll20 setup I have for the game. Here's a Fury I have. So just to show how I would do it in Roll20, their signature ability is a Brutal Slam. So if you come down here to the Brutal Slam, you do a power roll, 2d10. You're going to add 2 to it, so that's a 17 on the result there. You go to the tier 3 result. The results are easy to remember. You don't need to write down the ranges. If you remember that, the tier 2 is 12, just adding a 1 before the 2 there. And then tier 3 is 17. That's a higher version of a 12 by taking the bottom off of the 2 there. So 12 and 17 are the tier 2 and tier 3. Once you know that, you have that memorized. It's always the same on everything. And they do damage and push. So every single attack this Fury is doing with their action once per round, they're pushing 1, 2, or 4. And they have things that make the pushes greater. So things are getting pushed all over the place all the time. And that's it. That's an action. And then they might have they might have triggered things, like they have mobility and their relentless toss, which is renamed. So you're watching for triggers every round. You're always engaged in the whole round, watching for triggers. You're going to have your actions. You're going to have maneuvers. You're going to have movement. It's a lot going on, but I think it really engages the players the whole time. So let me go back to the hero manuscript. All right, so that's a character. So what other cool things do they have in here that's different? So really, to me, it feels a lot. It's a very tactical game. You're in it, fighting in it. Things are escalating as you go. Then outside of combat, they have this interesting negotiation mechanic, which kind of is hard to get a hold of because if I look at it, it kind of goes on and on here for page after page, and it's a lot of stuff. So I made an outline for myself of it, and it's not too bad once you have the outline. Let's look at the outline. It's going to be a little bit small on the screen, unfortunately.
If you're one of those folks who complain that D&D is just about combat because it has few, if any, rules about social interaction, well, Draw Steel definitely draws this up as a response to it, because it is a crunchy system for negotiation, and it's well thought out because it sort of gives social reasons for you to gain an edge in a negotiation or otherwise kind of take advantage of what you know and your ingenuity in the interaction. It's pretty well done. I'm not sure I needed those rules, but this is a system that I could definitely see as something to highlight.
Okay, so negotiations, when you look at those, see, I was going to look at, share this instead. So you initiate a negotiation when someone has something that you want, but they're not necessarily willing to give it to you, and they're not completely, shut the door on giving it to you. So they will start out with some sort of interest and some sort of patience. And say they're open to negotiation, that'll be in the middle between 1 and 5, or 0 and 5 is what they range. So you might start at 3 and 3 with interest and patience both at 3. And then they will have their various motivations and their various pitfalls, things that motivate them, that are positive to them. And there's some examples given: benevolence, discovery, freedom, greed, higher authority, etc. And pitfalls might be some of those same things, but that spark ire, discomfort, or shame. And so you want to kind of play to their motivations and avoid their pitfalls. You can just ask them right up, what do you want? What do you want for you to go tell the Duke to give us free passage through the border or whatever? And they might tell you one of their motivations. You can appeal to that, and basically you make an argument. And if you are making an argument to a motivation, you have an easier time than if you're making an argument without knowing what's motivating them. And you want to try and avoid their pitfalls, because if you hit a pitfall, it will reduce their patience, it will reduce their interest. And then basically you make one round of arguments, and then you see what their response is. Their patience and interest will either go up or down. And if it's at a 3, then they're going to say, yeah, I'll give you what you want, but there's something required of you. And as it goes higher and higher, it's like, yeah, I'll give you what you want, or yeah, I'll give you what you want, and I'll give you something else. And as it goes lower and lower, it's like, no, but if you do this for me, I'll give you what you need, or just flat no, or no, and we're done, type of thing. So you're just kind of going up and down this tree of patience and interest. When interest runs out, you're done. When patience gets to the peak of 5 or the pit of 0, you're done. And you're trying to use your motivations to go up and down. I didn't say that very well, but that's it. It looks like a lot on paper. Even the outline looks like a lot because there's a lot kind of to it, but it's pretty simple to actually use.
It's almost tactical as far as social interaction, and that's unique in systems that I've seen.
And you can suss out motivations in other ways besides, you can ask, of course, right at the start. You can try to suss out or uncover the motivation by making a reason, intuition, or presence test once per argument. You can do research. You can research a person you're going to go talk to before you talk to them and see what their motivations are. And if you have renown, that can be beneficial to you. If you speak their language, that can be beneficial to you. Lots of things can help it go up or down. If you lie to them and they catch you, then that could be detrimental to you. So you got to watch out for that. We got a question here in the chat. And Tiger Uppercut, does every player take a turn in negotiations? Not necessarily, but they've opened it up to use basically all your different reasoning, intuition, and presence. So like intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. So you're using your insight and your perception and your knowledge skills and all that stuff. So most characters have pretty good at one of those. So everyone should get a chance to take a turn negotiating. So now let's talk about montage tests. So I feel like they did a good job with these. These really feel like a 4E skill challenge, but they took out the parts that didn't work and they kept the parts that worked and maybe tweaked them a little bit. So for these, you want to get to a certain number of successes before a certain number of failures on doing tests. And depending on how hard or easy, those will be different numbers. I have them here like 5 successes before 5 failures for easy, 7 successes before 3 failures for hard. And if you get total success, you're going to gain a victory. And if it was a hard test, 2 victories. And if you are partially successful, you'll achieve a victory if it was moderate or hard. And if you fail, you won't gain anything. The challenges are defined. So rather than like in 4E, just make up whatever you want to make up, the idea is you should have actual things that the characters have to do. And each character should also be timed. So there's like just 2 loops through this test. Each character will get a chance to act twice through this test. And they can still influence it in ways other than just making a skill check. If they have magical things that might help them in the test, they can use those. And then finally, they should only use each individual one of their skills once during the test. Like they shouldn't repeat whatever skill they might have, like lifting. They shouldn't be lifting twice. So it, I think, really takes the best parts of a skill challenge. What do you think about that one, David?
Well, I'm not won over to the skill challenge or the montage yet, but it does sound like it's an improvement on the skill challenge by having specific obstacles that players face. So it's more of a tale, a montage, if you will, of progress.
Yep.
And I like that aspect.
Yeah, let's see. And it's buried, if you come to the rules, under tests and then montage tests. In tests, you were looking at the testing a little bit about how you fail, what you do on a failed test type of thing, when you make a test. Talk about that a little bit.
Good advice that they have on tests. Some of it's the usual stuff that you would expect. Don't ask for a test if it's going to bring the adventure to a halt. Don't ask for a test if the outcome of the test is not going to be interesting. What was interesting that I was comparing earlier today is the advice on whether somebody can make a test again if, for example, they pick a lock and fail. In here, they suggest that no, you can't try the lock again. That failed test means that it's beyond your capability, but you can imply some ingenuity, or you can consult an expert or somehow find a way to take another crack at it after you've learned something or changed the situation. And I like that approach. The D&D approach is absolutely the opposite. You can just keep trying to pick the lock as long as you want, assuming that, you know, you're not running out of time or something, which is seldom the case. And that's just kind of tiresome in most cases.
Yeah. They did streamline the difficulties or change them a little bit. So when you make an easy test, you're going to succeed all the time. Sometimes there'll be a consequence and sometimes a reward. When you have a medium test, you're going to fail if you roll 11 or lower. And a hard test, you're going to fail if you roll 16 or lower. And that's slightly changed from before. So that's test outcomes. We talked about montage tests. We talked about negotiation. I did not get a good look at the downtime projects. There's a lot here. And
there's a lot. And some of them seem kind of mundane, like make a road or go fishing,
right,
and stuff like that. And for a heroic game, I don't know how I feel about that, but I think it's kind of cool.
Yeah. So I need to dig into that more. Rewards, they have some stuff. Oh, I didn't even really dig into the treasure.
There is a lot of stuff here.
That's always a fun thing to look at. They got 4 echelons of treasure. And are they kind of unique treasures? It looks like they might be. There's a healing potion, so let's see what that does. When you drink the potion as a maneuver, you regain stamina, equal probably to your recovery value without spending a recovery. Yeah. That feels like a 4th edition potion of healing, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
Yeah. And then like greater healing was your stamina plus a roll, I think it was, if they had that. Let's see if they have like a 3rd echelon healing potion in here. Everything in this game is very informed by the world, right? A lot of stuff is world named or has to do with the world, which is going to maybe be a selling point, because I think a lot of people are interested in that. And you can, of course, drop out the things for your own campaign. Yeah, I don't see a greater healing potion of any sort here.
I'm not sure such a thing is in there. That would be a little mundane for a higher echelon item.
So those are consumables. Then you got leveled treasures found, earned, or crafted. Leveled armor treasures. Let's look at a implement. Let's look at a weapon. Leveled weapon. Blade of quintessence. Oh, this is interesting. So they kind of go up in power as you level up. That's nice. And I don't see a +1 sword here. It looks like everything's pretty unique looking.
They do interesting things for all the powers. Yeah. One other thing that's worth calling out is all these items have a prerequisite. So if your players opt to try and craft some of these things, there's actually an adventure hook that does 2 things. One of them requires them to find something to get the item, so they're just not like they might in the 2024 D&D making wands of magic missile for 200 gold pieces in 10 days every like an assembly line, but also that inspires potential adventures for trying to get these prerequisites. So you hook into the crafting, you get a lead on adventure, and you give the director a mechanism to sort of limit how much of a problematic item that folks can make.
Yeah, this is the blade of the luxurious fop. So you have to have a personal blessing from the greatest duelist in the land and 6 fake and extremely shiny gemstones to make it.
Yeah, some of these things are just so fun that they have as a prerequisite, and they get more epic as the items get more and more powerful.
One thing about this game and games like this, there's just so many little things, little tweaks, little powers. you want to, it's like you get to a table and you're playing. It's like, oh, did you remember this? Did you remember that? Do you remember this thing? It's like, okay, everyone settle down, play your own character. And if someone forgets something, don't stop the game to remind them. Otherwise, it kind of just tears the game. It slows the game down for everyone because there is a lot of stuff people might forget.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, definitely a lot of stuff people could forget. So that's rewards. Gods and religion. I haven't even looked at the gods and religion section, but this is definitely informed by the world. And
there's something like 30 pages of gods in this. Somebody went to town on it.
Dark gods and evil saints. Nice. Yeah, it'd be interesting to get like a 1 hour or less YouTube video on the creation myth and story and story of the gods and such for the world. I wonder if Matt's done something like that. Mercer did something like that for his game world. It was pretty neat. It's like 8 minutes long, but it kind of really got you to, okay, here's the creation myth. Here's where the gods come from. Here's what they're doing. It was pretty interesting. So that'd be neat to see. All right. And then for the director, I haven't read through this yet.
I haven't read through it, but there looks like some really good advice in here.
Yeah. Okay, let's look at, so that's the hero book. And there's 2 books that come with the game, the hero book and the monster book. And the hero book without art is 341 pages. I don't know if the typeset will still be this large or not. But yeah, it's going
to be fat.
It's going to be a big book.
Yep.
For sure. And it's interesting that, it's 10 levels of adventuring. It'd be interesting to see how long a campaign that went from 1 to 10 took in this game. Okay, let me share the monsters now. Why don't you talk about this and I'll change pages for you as you go.
Well, I was kind of interested in this purpose of monsters introduction at the beginning of the book. And it seems to be basically what they're saying on this page is, okay, we're giving you a lot of monsters and basically you're supposed to kill them. And this is why you can feel okay about it, because creatures only become monsters when they're doing evil things. And there's a bold paragraph down there. And then at the end, it says, if that isn't enough for you to feel okay about killing these monsters when they become monsters by doing nasty things, well, everybody loves zombies, so you can still kill zombies and devils and whatnot. I don't disagree with any of this stuff, but it sure seems like a big U-turn from the early days of the hobby.
Yep.
Where everything was a monster and it was just perfectly, nobody worried about whether or not you could go and kill it just to take its stuff,
Right. Yep. It has changed a lot. And I don't know how many people come into these games need this, but maybe some do. Maybe it's more and more in the world today that they need that. When I was a kid, we didn't need that. We were just killing monsters.
Yeah, it's
But it was a different world. I wasn't instructed by, lots of stuff in the world that might be a bad thing. And more and more, that's how people come to the game. And so if you don't address it, you might be, turning away people who are coming to the game wanting to see this. People are coming to the game that say, oh, this is dumb. Hopefully you do it in a way that doesn't drive those people away.
Well, I like a heroic game, so that's good with me.
Yep.
And I like a situation where you can feel okay about battling sentient creatures that may have perfectly just as much right to life as you do. So
now, by it being a heroic game, it's also, so back in the 80s, the mid 80s, I started playing in 79. So in the mid 80s, 83, 84 was the whole Satanic Panic thing. And my grandmother was a devout Roman Catholic, and she was a little bit concerned with this game we were playing. And she had my aunt sit in on the game with us, who was a psychiatrist. and asked me all sorts of questions about the game. And I think she's reporting back to my grandmother for my grandmother to be okay with it. And I was able to explain to her, we're killing dragons and we're killing demons and we're killing slavers and we're killing all these bad guys. It's a game
Mhm.
about us being heroes and killing the bad guys, which it didn't have to be. You could have not been the heroes, but that's what we were playing.
Yeah.
And so it was easy to defend the game, and my grandmother was happy and satisfied. And I never had the game taken away from me or anything like that because I was able to explain it that way. This game you can explain that way. We're killing dragons, we're killing villains, we're killing bad guys. If you ever face that again. Okay, off my soapbox, back to the game. What do you want to go to next, David?
Carry on with your page through if you'd like.
Okay, so we got monster basics. Let's talk about Malice real quick. So the DM has a heroic resource for Malice, and not a heroic resource, but the equivalent of a heroic resource for the enemies of Malice that they have to keep track of. There's a lot of stuff to keep track of. When I ran this game as a DM, it was kind of overwhelming, and that was at playtest packet 2, and they kind of pulled it back a little bit. I'll be interested to run a game and see if they pulled it back far enough for my liking, such that it's runnable without me feeling like I'm forgetting half the things I'm supposed to remember while I'm DMing. We'll see how it goes. So you can spend Malice. Let's look at. I was looking through some monsters, and one really cool one was Undead. And now, one thing they can do with their Malice. Let's look at this. Undead Malice, level 1+ Malice features Paranormal Fling. Takes 3 Malice, and we didn't look at how much you start with, but you start with quite a bit. You start with. You get Malice equal to the average number of victories per hero, so the first one will be 0. Then at the start of each of the rounds of combat, you're going to add 1 per hero. So, if you've got 6 players, you're going to get 6 every round, and they'll be ratcheting up as they're getting victories. So if they come to the 4th encounter of the day and they've already got 3 victories, it's going to start higher. Anyway, so you're going to have a lot of Malice to be spending. And if we come to Undead, Paranormal Fling, up to 3 objects on the encounter map that aren't held or tethered to the ground float 1 square off the ground, and then they're pulled 5 squares toward the nearest enemy within the 3 squares of them. So it's going to force an impact, and you're going to take damage by however many squares of movement they have left. So if you're 1 square away from them, they're going to do 4 damage to you, and if you're 3 away, they're going to do 2 damage to you. But it's pretty cool little feature there for Undead Malice. Abyssal Rift, Dread March. Intensity tally of the number of living heroes not adjacent to one. There's so much to track. This is painful seeing how much there is to track. I'd love to see them run this game and just how much they get right and get wrong while they're running it. I like how minions work in the game. I'm hogging the spotlight. Which monster you want to talk about, David?
Oh, this is good.
This is good. Okay, so minions. They have stamina, and basically you kind of could roll through them with a single attack. If you did 8 damage, you'd kill 2 minions, for example. And they, in general, they should each be targeting a different creature. Target 1 creature or object per minion. So in theory, you roll 1 time on their, for example, this crawling claw. When it's their turn, the group of them, you just do 1 roll, and then everyone they're adjacent to is taking damage. Now, you're not supposed to pile them up onto one person. I think there's a description of what to do there. You don't do the damage for every one of them in that case, but you might increase the damage by a small amount if there's multiples.
There's good advice for building and running encounters at the beginning of this chapter. In fact, it's probably the best advice that I've seen in any dungeon crawling style RPG ever. And I particularly like that they have a list of encounter objectives on page 10. So you can go ahead and spice up your encounters with one of these sub-objectives that's something more interesting than just kill everything. Always a good recipe for a better encounter.
Tiger Apricot says, if you don't like fighting the monsters, you can use the negotiation system to convince them to stop monstering. Right. Okay. Yeah, that's cool. Different types of encounters. Minions we talked about. Counter building. Definitely not a science. Level 1 hero or 3 victories. 2 heroes, 3, 4, 5. It's, I really like how it works out in D&D now. It's really easy for me to build encounters that are challenging, just using the system that Mike Schley came up with. I tweak it a little bit, but it's so simple because you're just taking their, level or their challenge ratings. This one's got a little bit more numbers to add up, but hopefully I'll have to try it and see how it works out. Okay, and then everything's very unique to the system. Let's look at some sort of a boss creature. Level 9 leader. Actually, a dragon would be a good boss creature. Omen Dragon. This feels like kind of like a black dragon, but they're not colored. They're unique to the world. You got Thorn. Maybe Gloom is more like black. Thorn might be like green. Crucible might be like fire.
That makes sense. Yeah,
maybe.
I can see how this lines up.
Maybe
could line up. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think it does line up exactly, but let's look at an Omen Dragon. So here's a stat block. I have to change the aspect.
Whoa, there's a lot going on there.
Oh my God, is there a lot going on there? I just came from a ShadowDark game, and I didn't even get that right. And now I have to look at this stat block. Let's go through it here. So you got Dragon. You got 550 stamina. They're 8th level. They're a solo. Size 5, so it's 5 by 5 squares. Stability 6, so they're going to be really hard to push around. Unless you push them 7, they don't go anywhere. Their immunity to some corruption damage. Their free strike attacks do 9 damage. They have a speed of 10 squares, and they can fly. Their best ability is presence, or characteristic is presence, +5. I kind of like how solo monsters are run in this system. You take 2 turns each round. They can't be consecutive, so you could go first, then a character, then you go again. You get 2 actions on each of your turns, so they're going to be doing 4 actions around. That's pretty strong for a solo, right? It's matching up with 4 characters.
It's about right.
Yeah, while dazed, they can take 1 action still. So even if you daze them, they're still taking an action and a maneuver.
I like it.
I like the ending effects thing that they did. Rather than having legendary resistances, they can end effects at the end of their turn and take some damage. So I might implement that in a game I'm working on, where it's like you're still making, because it really sucks in 5e. It's like, hey, I just use this awesome spell, and they just use this power and save and does nothing. It'd be nice to at least do some damage.
That's a great approach, because trading damage means that your effects do something. They don't just get shrugged off. But, hit points are kind of a resource to begin with.
Yeah.
And makes a lot of sense to make trades like that.
They have a Aura 4, difficult terrain, can't regain stamina. They have a death count, which is a special thing so you're already tracking a shit ton of stuff. Now you're going to track a death count in addition. Death count. Several of the dragon's abilities impose a death count on the target. At the end of every turn, a creature with a death count has their death count reduced by 1. If they are within the dragon's aura, they die. Wow. And it's lifted when the dragon is destroyed. This is interesting. It's like a countdown to end the encounter.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting mechanic. You have 12 rounds, or you're going to die. And some things might reduce it faster. Okay, so you're coming to play the dragon. You're keeping track of a death count. You got its aura. It's getting lots of attacks or lots of actions. It's got a corroding breath signature, which is a 5 cube. I like that they're using like 4th edition areas. That's like one of my favorite things of 4th edition. Is that things were always cubic.
Yes.
It's so easy to adjudicate on the table. So 5 cube within 10. Each target makes an agility test. So this is the inverse of power roll. Now the targets are making power rolls, and they want to roll high still in order to get the lowest damage possible. So you get hit by this corroding breath. You're going to try to roll a 17 or higher on an agility test, and you're going to take 9 corruption if you do. And if your presence is less than 3, you're going to be dragon sealed. Save ends. Is that the same as death count? No. Okay, so what's dragon sealed? Only creature with souls can be dragon sealed. Until the condition ends, a dragon sealed creature appears ghastly and pale. Presence score is considered 1 lower when resisting potency. So this is going to just pile on. And they can't regard other creatures as allies. Holy shit, that's not good. Can't regard other creatures as allies. Wow, that's bad. So how does save ins work and how does potencies work? And can you reduce a potency by spending surges? I don't think you can. I think the dragon might be able to increase the potency by spending surges. So your presence is only going to be 2 when you first start, but you're not fighting this thing when you first start. You're fighting this thing when you're 8th level. I'm not sure what your potency is going to be at 8th level. But if you are affected, you don't roll high enough on your agility test, and you're affected by this. Save ins is like kind of like a 4th edition save ins, where it's just a 50-50 chance. So once you're affected by something, you're a 50-50 chance to drop it at the end of each of your turns. So there's that. That's a action. Or they could do a barbed tail swing, which is also an action. And I don't know that there's anything limiting them from doing this action twice. 2 actions each of their turns. Be good if there's something that they didn't breathe twice on you, but maybe they can. Barbed tail swing. So this one, they get a roll instead of you rolling a defensive roll or resistance roll. And they're doing pretty good damage. And they can cause you to bleed, which means I think you can't spend a stamina save ins on that. They can spend 3 malice to pull you 5. The potency of this ability increases by 2. Wow, so then you're going to be might 5, or you'd have to have a might of 5 to avoid this one, and 6 to avoid that one, and 7 to avoid that one.
Which means you've got to have some bonuses, I think, because I think your regular might can only go as high as 5.
Oh, gotcha. Detonation. Yeah, like you can, yeah. Okay, so detonation is a maneuver. You have to spend 5 malice to do it, though. Distance 10 bursts. So everything within 10 of you. All dragon sealed enemies in the burst. So you were dragon sealed if you failed this check badly enough. Takes 9 corruption damage. The Omen Dragon regains stamina equal to half the total damage dealt. And this ends the dragon seal. So he could breathe on you, smash you with a tail swing, hit you with a detonation, and that'd be it for a turn. He's got this free maneuver. Once per turn, he chooses 1 dragon seal target within line of effect and imposes the bleeding condition, save ins on it. So you do this, put bleeding on one of you, hit you with the tail swing, hit you with a detonation, and he's got a triggered action, don't turn away. The creature that leaves his aura, which is 4. Dragon shifts up to their speed. The death count of each dragon sealed creature that comes within 1 of the dragon during their movement is reduced by 1. Repent, free triggered, another free, was that first one a free triggered action? So this is a triggered. So that triggered action they can do once per round. Or yeah, once per round. A free triggered action, and I wonder if they reset when they take their second action. I have to look that up. Repent, free triggered action, 2 malice. Distance melee to range 5, triggered creature. Dragon sealed creature deals damage to the dragon. The dragon allows the target to choose between making a free strike against itself or gaining a death count of 5. Okay. All healing abilities used in the area are only half as effective in their domain. So they have domain like lair actions or lair abilities, I think it would be called. In 5e, additionally, when a creature with a soul dies, the dragon absorbs the soul. Whew. Okay. Then we come to villain actions. So that's all the stuff you can do normally, every round, all the time. Villain actions, I kind of like the way they do villain actions instead of legendary actions like they do in 5e. It's like they kind of ratchet up, and you do them in a set order, so you don't need to really worry too much about what you're doing in what order.
Yeah, much like in Flea Mortals in there.
Yeah, I do like that. So a 5 burst, so 5 squares all every direction. All enemies pull 1 and change their death count. What you deserve. The dragon delivers each target a premonition of their imminent death. That's awesome. Oh man. At the end of every turn, so you're down to 6. Then at the end of the turn, you lose another one. So you only got 6 rounds to live now. If that happens to you, Souls of the Broken, second villain action. So you do these once per. I need to look this up for a solo. It's once per round if it's not a solo, but does a solo do it Can they do it twice per round? Because they get 2 turns per round. I have to look that up. Souls of the Broken, villain action 2, 2d10 plus 5, range 10, 5 creatures. So you're hitting the whole party with it. Spits fragments of soul to possess targets. Make a separate roll for each target. Wow. So they're safe if their presence is 5. But if it's less than 5, make free strike against close ally, move up to their speed toward the dragon, frighten save ends. And then so long and good night. 6 burst, all dragon sealed creatures in the burst. Dragon's eyes glow with a malicious intent. If a target has a death count, it is reduced by 1. Wow.
This puts a lot on the director's plate, but
Oh boy,
it sounds like a blast to run and a lot of fun to
and it
battle against.
certainly feels like a solo, right? Like you could have
Absolutely.
just it. So you're not having to track 5 different monsters. You're tracking this one monster.
Yeah, and something different is going to be happening every turn when you're battling this. It's not going to be breath and then a bunch of turns of claw bite or anything like that.
Right.
It's going to be what are we in for next as the countdown of that
A death count.
That death count rises higher and higher. Wow.
Yeah, that's a solo there. That's a level 8, not even a level 10 solo. They have a undead 4th echelon. There's a lich. Greater zombie shambler. Level 10. Oh, then they have like named creatures too. Level 10 solo. Whew. Yeah, this could be a lot of fun. And I think, once you get a handle of how everything works here, it might go pretty quick. It kind of guides you what you're going to do. You're going to do your villain actions, boom, 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 as soon as you can. Do those 3, then you got to watch out for all the other triggered things. You got maneuver, triggered action, just an ongoing thing, another ongoing thing. So a lot there. There's a lot of creatures in here. How many pages is this guy?
There's no page number,
No
but
page number.
264.
Acrobat,
say.
Yeah, 264 is what my PDF reader says. All right. Any questions from anyone watching on that? Anything else you want to look at, David, in the monster section?
I think that covers what stood out for me, and I've barely dipped my toe in this. There's a lot of stuff going on here.
So for the complete opposite, let's look at the adventure I ran Saturday. This was a free one that Kelsey put out if you join our mailing list. Raiders of the Hidden Temple. Put this in here. Share this instead. ShadowDark. So ShadowDark is, you can make a character in about 5 minutes and you'll be off and running. And they come fast and easy and they die fast and easy. So it's a whole different feel of game. And I think MCDM, I think Matt and James have talked about wanting to do a game like this. So it'll be interesting to see what their take will be on a very simple, straightforward game. Random encounters, and the map is kind of a little bit enunciated. I really like putting everything I need to run a game on the map of the game. It makes it so easy to run and not forget stuff. And you just put little notes where you need to remember notes and such. And this little map is great. You got multiple loops, right? And you got multiple factions that are at odds with each other that you can play against each other. Just a really cool little adventure. It took about 2 hours to run. The whole description of everything in the adventure takes 3 pages.
Wow.
Right? And it took us 2 hours to run through 3 pages of adventure. The adventure per page count, the adventure per, character count is through the roof on ShadowDark. And then monsters in ShadowDark usually have one cool thing.
Mm-hmm.
What's the one thing that a golem for? It's that they slow and they also smash people, obviously. What's the one thing you know a vampire for? It's that they drain your blood. And so they have the usually the one cool thing that go along with them. And yeah, that's it. The adventure is 10 pages long. So 10 pages provide us 2 hours of adventure. And it could have gone longer because I messed up the turn attempt on the vampire. They turned the vampire failed the turn by 10, and I had it be destroyed. But if you read Turn Undead, you only destroy because it's your level or lower. So it still was a lot of fun to play.
Yeah.
Even with the vampire going down. And then if you look at the vampire here, it's kind of a little bit overpowered in that it does its bite 3 times. So it might be draining blood 3 times. So I'm working on my own system. Let me share this if I can. Well, I'm working on doing this where they get 3 actions and they can bite until they hit. And then they have rends to do after that. So it's like they get their signature thing happens, but not in a repetitive way. So I'm just going to change that. But really, this adventure, highly recommended. All these adventures are about what happens at the table and the ingenuity of the players. They're definitely not anywhere near the capability of a 5e D&D character or an MCDM Draw Steel character. And it's a whole different way to run a game. The monsters are super simple. Maybe you could say boring. But I think the danger and the excitement comes from the fact that you're on death's threshold versus here's a whole lot of crazy stuff happening, but we'll probably be okay. Like
yes.
the edition is,
could go wrong, and
yeah, we're probably going to be
any time.
Yeah,
very tense.
Very
Are there
tense.
wandering monsters in this
there is,
adventure? Yeah. It's got its own table, or
little random encounter table here: a cobra, some Viperians, sting bats, Vampirodile. The party they almost threw up their hands when they first fought the vampire spawn, then the vampire, then the crocodile vampire. They're like, what the hell? And the crocodile vampire is cool because they come into the first room there and they might look into the pool and see some gems down there and go get the gems. And if they go get the gems, then the next encounter that they're going to have after getting the gems, disturbing the water causes the next random encounter to be with the Vampirodile. So it moves him up in the order on the run, makes him an automatic next encounter.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it was cool. It was a fun little adventure. The noise, and darkness is so much fun in ShadowDark too, because they came to the room here where they had the vampire spawn screaming out to get let out of this room. They made friends with the Viperians, and the Viperians stood back while they opened that door to fight the vampire spawn, but the person standing at the door didn't have a torch. The person with the light source was down south over here, so the room was in darkness. And so I told him, you hear the screaming sound getting closer and it's running at you, and then boom, he saw it right as it attacked him. So that really brought some tenseness to that fight. So yeah, highly recommended. I love how fast a ShadowDark game runs. So any other questions? That's it, I think, Dave. So everyone have a good Christmas. Hopefully we'll see you next week or the week after.
Sounds great.
Bye, everyone.